When the Galactic Council sends an emergency summons to a mid-ranking human diplomat at 3 in the morning, ship time, it usually means one of two things. Either someone's about to declare war, or someone's done something so monumentally stupid that it requires immediate damage control. Violet had been hoping for the war. Wars, at least, made sense. Wars had protocols, procedures, and a clear chain of command. What she walked into on the bridge of the Harmonious Accord was something far worse than war. It was a bureaucratic nightmare wrapped in a physics impossibility, garnished with the kind of chaos that made seasoned military commanders weep into their morning stimulants. The flagship's main conference hall had been converted into what could only be described as a disaster zone. 6 Wolkari cubs, each roughly the size of a human 12-year-old, but covered in sleek, tawny fur and sporting retractable claws, stood in the center of the room in a configuration that defied both logic and geometry. They were connected. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, but physically connected by their emergency thermal suits in a way that suggested the universe itself had given up on making sense. Violet stopped in the doorway, coffee in hand, and stared. The cubs looked miserable. Their ears were flat against their skulls, their tails drooped, and their golden eyes held the particular shame of young people who know they've messed up spectacularly and are now the center of unwanted attention. Around them, a small army of alien officials gestured wildly, consulted data pads, and argued in at least 6 different languages. Ixthul, the Uxmoth official who'd sent the summons, skittered over on his 6 legs. The insectoid's compound eyes whirred as they focused on Violet, and his mandibles clicked in what she'd learned to recognize as extreme agitation. "Human Violet," he buzzed, his translator rendering his speech in clipped, precise tones. "You have arrived. This is acceptable. We require your assistance immediately." Violet took a long sip of her coffee. "Ixthul, I'm going to need you to explain to me, very slowly and very clearly, what I'm looking at here." "A catastrophe," Ixthul said flatly. 6 Wolkari cadets engaged in a standard survival drill 3 planetary rotations ago. They were instructed to don emergency thermal suits as part of their training. The suits are standard issue, used across 40 member species, with a failure rate of 0.003%. They are, by all measures, foolproof. Uh-huh. Violet walked closer to the cubs, circling them slowly. The suits were sleek, dark blue affairs with glowing seams and what appeared to be several dozen fastening points along the torso, arms, and legs. Except the fastening points weren't fastened to the right suits. Pix's left arm was connected to Thule's right shoulder. Thule's torso was somehow bonded to Kren's back. Kren's leg attached to Mox's chest, and so on, creating a living, breathing knot of embarrassed alien children. "So," Violet said, fighting to keep her voice level, "they put the suits on wrong?" "Incorrect." Ixthul's antennae quivered. "The suits possess adaptive fastening technology. They are designed to be impossible to misalign. The fasteners only bond to their corresponding points on the same suit. What you are observing should not be possible." Violet raised an eyebrow. "And yet," Ixthul agreed miserably. A Kelfin official, his blue-green skin glistening under the ship's lights, undulated over. Olamine's gill slits fluttered as he spoke, his voice carrying the melodic quality of his aquatic species. "We have attempted every standard separation protocol. The suits refuse to disengage. We have consulted the manufacturer's technical specifications. We have run diagnostic algorithms. We have even attempted to negotiate with the suit's operating systems." "The suits don't have operating systems," Violet said. "We discovered that on the second day. Olmin admitted, his skin flushing a deeper blue in what Violet recognized as Kelfin embarrassment. "Second day," Violet repeated. "You've been working on this for 3 days?" 3 days, 8 hours, and 19 minutes, Ixthul corrected. "We have made minimal progress. In fact, our interventions have, in some cases, worsened the situation." Violet turned to the cubs. "Can they talk?" "Of course they can talk," a new voice growled. Lixkor, one of the Walkari elders, stalked forward. He was massive, easily twice the size of the cubs, with silver streaking through his dark fur. His eyes held the kind of intensity that came from a lifetime of military service. "They are Walkari. They are warriors in training. They are also, apparently, the most foolish cubs in the history of our species." The cubs somehow managed to look even more miserable. Violet held up a hand. "With respect, Elder Lixkor, I'd like to hear their side of the story. Directly from them, if that's all right." Lixkor's tail lashed once, but he stepped back. "Proceed." Violet approached the nearest cub, a male with a distinctive white patch over one eye. "What's your name?" "Pix," the cub mumbled. "Okay, Pix, I'm Violet. I'm human, which means I'm probably the least qualified person in this room to understand alien technology, but I'm also the person they called when everyone else failed, so here we are." She smiled. "Can you tell me what happened?" Pix's ears twitched. "We were training. Standard survival protocols. We had to suit up within a time limit." "What was the time limit? 2 minutes? That's pretty fast. Were you competing?" The cubs exchanged glances, which was impressive given their current configuration. Pix's ears flattened further. "Not officially. But unofficially? We may have made it a race," Thule admitted. She was the cub connected to Pix's left side, her fur a lighter shade of tawny. "To see who could suit up. Fastest?" Violet nodded slowly. "Okay, so you're racing. Then what?" "The suits are complicated," Kren said. He was the largest of the cubs, with broader shoulders and darker fur. "Lots of fasteners, lots of steps." "And you were rushing," Violet said. "Yes." "Did anyone help anyone else?" Silence. Then Mox, a smaller cub with nervous energy radiating from every line of his body, spoke up. "I was having trouble with my shoulder fastener." Pix reached over to help. "While you were both wearing your suits?" "Yes." Violet closed her eyes. She could see it now, the cascade of errors. "And then?" "Then Thule's fastener wouldn't engage, so I tried to help her," Pix said. "But my suit was already partially connected to Mox's, and when I reached over—" "Things got tangled," Violet finished. "We panicked," Wynne said quietly. She was one of the 2 female cubs, smaller than the others, with bright green eyes. "We started pressing buttons, trying to release the fasteners, but they kept connecting to the wrong suits. And the more you pressed, the worse it got," Violet said. "Yes," Hux, the 6th cub, said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "We are sorry. We have brought shame to our clan." Lixkor made a sound that was half growl, half sigh. "They have brought paperwork to the council. Mountains of it. 3 days of the galaxy's finest minds attempting to solve a problem created by 6 foolish children." Violet turned to face the assembled officials. "Has anyone tried just untangling them?" Ixthul's antennae went rigid. "Untangling them?" "Yeah, like manually, working backward through the connections." "The suits are highly sophisticated technology," Olmin said, his skin rippling with what might have been offense. "They require sophisticated solutions." "They're also stuck together in a knot," Violet said. "And humans have been untying knots since before we figured out fire, sometimes the sophisticated solution is the wrong solution. We attempted brute force separation on the first day, Lixcor said. It nearly injured the cubs. The suit's fasteners are designed to withstand extreme stress. They will not simply pull apart. I'm not talking about pulling, Violet said. She walked around the cubs again, studying the connections more carefully. I'm talking about reversing the sequence, finding the first mistake, and working backward from there. We have analyzed the sequence, Ixthul said. The computational requirements alone. I don't need a computer, Violet interrupted. I need the cubs to show me exactly what they did. The room fell silent. Olimine's gills fluttered rapidly. Show you. Yeah, recreate your movements. Obviously you can't move much right now, but talk me through it. Pix, you helped Mox first, right? Right. Show me where you reached. Slowly. Pix extended his arm as far as the connections would allow, pointing to a spot on Mox's shoulder. Violet leaned in, examining the fastener. It was a small, circular device that glowed faintly blue. She could see where it had bonded to a corresponding point on Pix's suit instead of Mox's. Okay, she said. Then what? For the next 20 minutes, Violet had the cubs walk her through every step of their panicked button mashing. The alien officials watched in varying states of confusion and disbelief as the human diplomat treated their technological crisis like a puzzle made of string. And slowly, very slowly, Violet began to smile. I'll be damned, she said softly. You have identified the problem? Ixthul asked. Oh, I've identified several problems, Violet said. But yeah, I think I can get them unstuck. It's going to take some time, and the cubs are going to have to trust me and move exactly how I tell them to move. Can you do that? 6 pairs of golden eyes fixed on her. 6 heads nodded in unison. All right then, Violet said, rolling up her sleeves. Let's untie this knot. Lixcor stepped forward. Human Violet, if you can accomplish what the Council's finest engineers could not, the Wolkari will be in your debt. Violet grinned. Elder Lixcor, if I pull this off, all I want is a really good meal, and maybe an explanation for why nobody thought to just ask the kids what happened. The Wolkari elder's whiskers twitched in what might have been amusement. That can be arranged. Violet turned back to the cubs, her mind already working through the sequence of moves that would create slack in the connections, identify the anchor points, and reverse the cascade of errors that had created this magnificent disaster. 3 days, the galaxy's best minds had worked on this. 3 days of algorithms and analysis and sophisticated technological solutions. Violet figured she could have them free in under an hour. Sometimes, she thought, the best thing about being human wasn't that you were smarter or stronger or more advanced than everyone else. It was that you'd made so many mistakes, survived so many disasters, and untangled so many literal and metaphorical knots that you'd developed an instinct for chaos that more orderly species simply didn't possess. The cubs had tried to button their coats, and each coat had ended up buttoned to another cub. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was, Violet thought, as she began issuing careful instructions to Pix, the most human thing she'd seen aliens do since joining the Council. And if there was one thing humans knew how to fix, it was human-style mistakes. The first thing Violet did was ask for a chair. Not for herself, but for perspective. She had it placed at various angles around the cubs, climbing onto it to examine the connections from above, then crouching low to see them from below. The alien officials watched this performance with expressions ranging from confusion to barely concealed impatience. Is the human engaging in some form of ritual? Olamine whispered to Ixthul, his skin flickering through shades of blue and green. "I can hear you," Violet said without looking up. "And no, I'm mapping the problem. You can't solve a knot if you can't see how it's structured." She pulled out her data pad and started sketching, not with sophisticated modeling software, but with a basic drawing application. Lines connecting circles, arrows indicating direction, numbers marking sequence. It looked less like engineering and more like a child's game of connect the dots. Ixthul's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Human Violet, we have complete three-dimensional scans of the cub's current configuration. We have run spatial analysis algorithms. We have—" "You have data," Violet interrupted, still sketching. "I need understanding. There's a difference." She hopped off the chair and approached Kren, the largest cub. "When you press the emergency release on your chest fastener, which hand did you use?" Kren blinked. "My right hand." "And you were already connected to Mox at that point?" "Yes." "So you had to reach across your body?" "Yes." Violet made a note. "Which means you probably hit two buttons at once, the release and the secondary fastener right next to it." Kren's ears perked up. "I might have. Everything was happening very fast." "I bet it was." Violet moved to Win. "You said you panicked. What's the first thing you did when you realized something was wrong?" Win's tail curled around her leg, a nervous gesture. "I tried to step backward, to get away from the others." "But you were already connected." "Yes. So when I stepped back, I pulled Hux forward, and he stumbled into Thule, and everyone started moving at once," Violet finished. "Pressing buttons, trying to disconnect, but actually just creating more connections because the suits thought you were trying to help each other suit up." Lixcor's eyes narrowed. "The suits have a cooperative mode for injured personnel who require assistance." "Let me guess," Violet said. "It activates automatically when it detects multiple suits in close proximity, with fasteners being engaged in non-standard patterns?" Olamine's gills went completely still. "How did you know that?" "Because it's exactly the kind of safety feature that makes perfect sense in theory and causes absolute chaos in practice." Violet returned to her sketching. The suits were trying to help. They detected what they thought was a group assistance scenario and started allowing cross-suit connections. The more the cubs panicked and pressed buttons, the more the suits tried to be helpful. "That is not in the technical specifications," Olamine said weakly. "I'm guessing it's in the fine print," Violet said. "The part that assumes users will read the manual and understand the edge cases." Ixthul's antennae drooped. "We did not consult the manual. The suits are marketed as intuitive." "Nothing is intuitive when you're 12 and panicking," Violet said. She turned to the cubs. "No offense." "None taken," Pix said. "We were definitely panicking." Violet studied her sketch for a long moment, then nodded to herself. "Okay, I think I've got it. The good news is I can get you unstuck. The bad news is it's going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to have to move in ways that feel wrong." "We are Wolkari," Lixicor said. "We do not fear discomfort." "Great. Pix, I need you to rotate your left shoulder forward and down, like you're trying to touch your elbow to your hip." Pix moved slowly, his face scrunching in concentration. The connection between his suit and Thule's shifted, the glowing fastener dimming slightly. "Good," Violet said. "Hold that. Thule, now you're going to lean right, toward Kren. Not a lot, just a few centimeters." Thule leaned. Another fastener dimmed. "Excellent. Kren, this is going to feel weird, but I need you to lift your left leg like you're taking a really high step." Kren lifted his leg. The Cub's configuration shifted, creating visible slack in several connections. How is this possible? Ixthul breathed. We attempted thousands of movement combinations. None of them created this effect. You were trying to pull them apart, Violet said, her eyes never leaving the Cubs. I'm creating slack. It's like untying a shoelace. You don't pull the knot tighter, you work the loops until you find the give. Mox, tiny step forward. Tiny. Mox stepped. 2 more fasteners dimmed. The human is a wizard, Wynne whispered. The human is a problem solver, Violet corrected, though she couldn't help but grin. Hux, I need you to duck your head, like you're trying to look at your feet. For the next 30 minutes, Violet choreographed an intricate dance of small movements. Rotate here, lean there, shift weight, lift, lower, turn. The Cubs followed her instructions with increasing confidence, and slowly the connections began to release. Each dimmed fastener was accompanied by a soft click and a collective exhale from the watching officials. This is remarkable, Ullman said. The computational power required to calculate these movements— I'm not calculating, Violet said. I'm feeling it out. Humans are really good at spatial reasoning when it comes to physical problems. We spent thousands of generations tying knots, weaving baskets, braiding hair, untangling fishing nets. This is just a high-tech version of the same thing. Your species developed advanced problem-solving skills through primitive crafts? Ixthul sounded genuinely baffled. Our species developed advanced problem-solving skills through making mistakes and fixing them, Violet said. Okay, Pix, this is the big one. I need you to twist your torso left while Thule twists right. It's going to feel like you're pulling against each other, but trust me. The 2 Cubs moved in opposite directions. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a sigh, 3 fasteners released simultaneously. Pix's left arm came free from Thule's shoulder. The Cubs gasped. Lixcor Z. Tail went rigid. 1 down, Violet said. 5 to go. The process accelerated after that. With 1 Cub partially free, Violet had more options for creating slack and leverage. She worked methodically, never rushing, always explaining what she needed and why. The Cubs responded with the kind of focus that came from finally seeing progress after 3 days of being stuck. Thule came free next, then Kren. Mox and Wynne separated with a particularly satisfying series of clicks. Finally, only Hux remained, connected to his own suit, in a configuration that looked painful, but was, Violet assured him, easily fixable. Okay, Hux, last one. I need you to reach behind your back with your right hand and press the fastener between your shoulder blades. Not the glowing one, the dark one next to it. Hux reached, his face contorted with effort. I cannot reach it. Yes, you can. You're just tensing up. Relax your shoulder. Let your arm go loose. Hux took a breath, relaxed, and his hand found the fastener. He pressed it. The final connection released with a click that echoed through the suddenly silent conference hall. 6 Cubs stood free, their suits hanging loose and deactivated. For a moment, everyone just stared. Then Wynne let out a whoop of joy that was quickly echoed by the other Cubs. They jumped, spun, and in Mox's case, did a backflip that made Lixcor growl in warning. 43 minutes, Ixthul said, staring at his chronometer. You accomplished in 43 minutes what we could not accomplish in 3 days. Violet stretched, her back popping. Different perspective, different approach. You were trying to solve a technology problem. I was solving a people problem. There is wisdom in that distinction, Lixcor said. He approached Violet, and for a moment she thought he might actually bow, which would have been deeply uncomfortable. Instead, he placed a massive paw on her shoulder. "You have freed our cubs and saved them from further humiliation. The Wolkari are grateful." "Just doing my job," Violet said. Then she paused, her eyes narrowing. "Actually, wait. Ixthul, can you pull up the diagnostic logs from the suits?" "The logs? Why?" "Because something's bothering me," Violet said. "These suits are used across 40 species, right? And they've got a 0.003% failure rate?" "Correct." "So how did 6 cubs manage to create a connection pattern that shouldn't be possible? Even with the cooperative mode, there should be safeguards." Olamin's skin went pale. "You think there is a defect?" "I think," Violet said slowly, "that we need to look at those logs very carefully. Because if these cubs found a way to break the suits, even accidentally, that's information the galaxy needs to know." The conference hall, which had been filled with relieved chatter and the excited voices of freed cubs, went quiet. Olamin's skin cycled through colors so rapidly, it looked like a malfunctioning display screen. Ixthul's antennae quivered with what Violet had learned to recognize as deep concern. "You believe the suits themselves are flawed?" Lixicor asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. "I believe 6 kids managed to do something that 3 days of expert analysis said was impossible," Violet replied. "That's not just user error. That's a gap in the system." Olamin made a sound like water gurgling through pipes. "The suits have been in service for 18 cycles, millions of units across 40 species. If there were a fundamental flaw, it would only show up under specific conditions," Violet finished. "Conditions that your testing probably never accounted for. Pull up the logs. Let's see what actually happened." Ixthul skittered to a console and began manipulating holographic displays. Streams of data cascaded through the air, glowing symbols and numbers that meant nothing to Violet, but clearly meant a great deal to the assembled aliens. The Uxmoth official's mandibles clicked in an increasingly rapid rhythm. "This is unusual," he said finally. "Unusual how?" Violet moved closer, though the alien script was incomprehensible to her. The suits recorded the connection sequence, as designed. However, there are gaps. Moments where the suit's internal chronometers show time passing, but no data was recorded. "How long are the gaps?" "Microseconds. Barely noticeable. But they exist at every point where a cross-suit connection was established." Violet felt a chill run down her spine. "That's not a bug. That's the system failing to process what's happening because it doesn't have a framework for it." Olamin swam closer to the display, his movements agitated. "Impossible. The suits are programmed to log every action, every state change. There should be no gaps." "Unless," Violet said slowly, "the suits encountered a state they weren't programmed to recognize. What happens when the cooperative mode activates?" Ixthul manipulated the display, pulling up technical specifications. The cooperative mode allows temporary cross-suit connections for emergency assistance. It is designed for situations where one individual must help another don their suit. The connections are meant to be brief and immediately reversible. "Okay, and what happens if multiple suits enter cooperative mode simultaneously?" Silence. Olamin's gills stopped moving entirely. Ixthul's antennae went rigid. "The specifications do not address that scenario," Ixthul said quietly. "Because your testing never included it," Violet said. "Why would it? In a controlled environment, you'd never have 6 people all trying to help each other at the same time while panicking and pressing random buttons. That's chaos. That's the kind of situation that only happens in the real world when everything goes wrong at once." Lixcor's tail lashed. "You are saying these suits have been in service for 18 cycles, with a critical flaw that no one detected? I'm saying, the flaw only manifests under conditions that orderly testing would never create, Violet said. She turned to the cubs, who had been listening with growing alarm. Pix, when you first tried to help Mox, what did the suit do? Did it give you any kind of feedback? Pix's ears flattened as he remembered. It beeped, 3 short beeps. I thought it meant the connection was successful. Thule, when you tried to help Pix after that, same thing? Yes, 3 beeps. Violet looked at Olmin. What do 3 beeps mean? The Kelfin's skin had gone a sickly gray-green. 3 beeps indicate successful fastener engagement. So, the suits were telling the cubs they were doing it right, even though they were creating impossible connections. That should not be possible, Olamin whispered. And yet. Violet gestured at the data still floating in the air. The logs don't lie. The suits entered a state where they were accepting and confirming connections that violated their own programming. That's not just a flaw. That's a catastrophic design oversight. Ixthul's entire body seemed to sag. If this flaw exists in all units, then you've got millions of suits in service that could fail under the right, or rather wrong, circumstances, Violet said. What happens if this occurs during an actual emergency? What if someone's trying to evacuate a damaged ship? Multiple people are helping each other suit up in a panic, and suddenly everyone's connected in a knot that takes 3 days to untangle? The implications hung in the air, like a physical weight. Lixicor's claws extended and retracted, a sign of extreme agitation. People would die. People would die, Violet agreed. These cubs got lucky. They were in a training exercise, in a controlled environment, with time and resources to fix the problem. In a real emergency, this flaw would be lethal. Olamin's voice was barely audible. I must contact the manufacturer immediately. All units must be recalled. The entire product line must be redesigned. That's going to be expensive, Violet said. That is irrelevant, Olamin said, and there was a firmness in his voice that Violet respected. The Kelfin value contracts and profit, but we value life more. If our product is flawed, we will make it right, regardless of cost. Ixthul turned to Violet. How did you identify this? Our finest engineers examined these suits for 3 days. Your finest engineers were trying to fix the immediate problem, Violet said. I fixed the immediate problem, and then I asked why it happened in the first place. Humans are really good at that second part, because we've spent our entire history dealing with the consequences of things going wrong in ways we didn't anticipate. She walked over to where the cubs stood, still looking shaken by the revelation that their embarrassing mistake had uncovered a galaxy-wide safety issue. These 6 did something that no professional tester thought to try. They panicked, they improvised, they made mistakes in rapid succession under stress. That's not a failure of training. That's real-world conditions. That's what actually happens when things go sideways. Lixcor studied the cubs with new eyes. They stress-tested the suits in a way that controlled testing never could. Exactly, Violet said. Controlled testing is great for finding expected problems, but the really dangerous flaws? Those only show up when everything goes wrong at once. When people are scared and rushing and making decisions based on panic instead of procedure. That's when systems fail in ways nobody predicted. And humans are familiar with such scenarios, Ixthul said. It wasn't quite a question. Violet laughed, a short, sharp sound. Familiar? We're experts. Humanity's entire technological development has been a series of things going catastrophically wrong, followed by desperate improvisation. We didn't carefully plan our way to space travel. We strapped ourselves to controlled explosions and hoped for the best. Half our safety regulations exist because someone tried something stupid and survived long enough to say, "Hey, maybe we shouldn't do that again." "That sounds terrifying," Wynne said quietly. "It is," Violet agreed, "but it also means we're really good at identifying failure points that more careful species miss. You all think in terms of how things should work. Humans think in terms of how things can break." Olamin had been working at a console, sending urgent messages. He turned back to the group, his skin still pale but his movements more controlled. "I have initiated a full recall. All units will be pulled from service within the next planetary rotation. The manufacturer is assembling a crisis team to redesign the cooperative mode protocols." "Make sure that team includes some chaos testing," Violet said. "Not just controlled scenarios. Get some people in a room, tell them there's an emergency, and see what happens when everyone panics at once." "We will," Olamin promised. "And human Violet, the Kelfin owe you a debt. You have potentially saved thousands of lives." "The Cubs saved those lives," Violet corrected. "I just figured out what they'd done. Pix, Thule, Kren, Mox, Wynne, Hux, you six just became the most important quality testers in the galaxy. You found a flaw that could have killed people." The Cubs' ears perked up. They stood a little straighter. The shame that had been weighing them down for 3 days began to lift, replaced by something that looked like cautious pride. "We are heroes?" Mox asked uncertainly. "You're heroes," Violet confirmed. "Accidental heroes, but that's the best kind. The kind who stumble into doing the right thing while trying to figure out how to fix their mistakes." Lixcor made a sound that might have been a chuckle. "There is a lesson here, for the Cubs, for the Council, perhaps for the galaxy. We spend so much time trying to eliminate chaos, to create perfect systems and flawless procedures. We forget that chaos is where the real testing happens." "Chaos is where life happens," Violet said. "You can't predict it, you can't control it, and you definitely can't eliminate it. The best you can do is learn to work with it, to see it not as a failure of planning, but as an opportunity to find the flaws in your planning." Ixthul's mandibles clicked in a pattern Violet had learned meant thoughtful consideration. "Your species was admitted to the Council despite being, by galactic standards, quite young and quite chaotic. There was significant debate about whether humanity was ready for membership. Some argued that your tendency toward disorder and improvisation was a weakness." "And now?" Violet asked. "Now I begin to understand that what we perceived as weakness may in fact be a unique strength. You approach problems from angles we cannot perceive because we are too invested in order, in procedure, in the way things should work. You see the way things actually work, in all their messy, chaotic reality." "We don't solve problems elegantly," Violet said. "We solve them desperately, creatively, and usually while something's on fire. But we solve them." Lixcor placed a paw on each of the Cubs' shoulders in turn, a gesture of approval. "You 6 will complete your training. And when you do, you will remember this day. You will remember that sometimes the greatest service comes not from following procedure perfectly, but from making mistakes that reveal truths others cannot see." The Cubs nodded solemnly, though Violet could see the relief in their eyes. They weren't failures. They were, improbably, heroes. "Now," Lixcor said, turning to Violet, "I believe I promised you a meal. The Wolkari keep their promises." Violet grinned. "I'm going to hold you to that. But first, I need about 10 hours of sleep. Saving the galaxy is exhausting." The meal, when it finally happened after Violet had slept off her exhaustion, was held in one of the Harmonious Accord's smaller dining halls. Violet had expected something formal, full of ceremony and stiff conversation. Instead, she found herself seated at a low table surrounded by the 6 cubs, Lixicor, and a spread of food that looked both alien and surprisingly appetizing. "We do not stand on ceremony when sharing a meal with those who have earned our respect," Lixicor explained, settling onto a cushion with surprising grace for someone his size. "This is how Wolkari families eat, together, as equals." The cubs were already digging into the food with the enthusiasm of young people who'd been through an ordeal and come out the other side. Violet tried something that looked like roasted vegetables and tasted like a combination of sweet potato and black pepper. It was good. Really good. "So," she said between bites, "has the council made any official statements about the suit recall?" 3 hours ago, Lixicor said. "Ullman's corporation has taken full responsibility. They are offering replacements and compensation to all affected parties. The redesign is already underway, with new testing protocols that include, as you suggested, chaos scenarios." "How's that going over?" "There is resistance from some quarters. The Uxmoth, in particular, struggle with the concept of intentionally creating disorder for testing purposes. Ixthul has been attempting to explain it to his superiors for the past 6 hours with limited success." Violet laughed. "I can imagine. Order and chaos don't usually play well together." "Yet you suggest they must," Lixicor said. "That true safety comes not from eliminating chaos, but from understanding how systems behave within it." "That's the human experience in a nutshell," Violet said. "We grew up on a planet that was actively trying to kill us. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, you name it. We didn't survive by creating perfect systems. We survived by being adaptable, by learning from mistakes, by expecting things to go wrong and having a backup plan. Usually, several backup plans." Pix, who had been listening while demolishing what looked like a meat skewer, spoke up. "Is it true that humans once traveled to their moon in a spacecraft that had less computing power than a modern data pad?" Violet grinned. "It's true. We did the math by hand, built the thing out of metal and hope, and sent 3 people into space on top of what was basically a giant bomb. And it worked. Not perfectly, there were problems, but it worked because the people involved knew how to improvise when things went wrong." "That is insane," Thule said, her eyes wide. "That's humanity," Violet agreed. "We're the species that looked at the stars and said, 'I bet we could get there if we tried hard enough and didn't think too carefully about all the ways it could kill us.'" Kren leaned forward. "The other species talk about humans. They say you are reckless, that you take risks no sane species would consider." "They're not wrong," Violet said. "But here's the thing about taking risks. You learn things that careful species never discover. You find solutions that orderly minds never consider. You survive situations that, by all logic, should kill you. And then you figure out how to make sure they don't kill the next person." "Is that why the council admitted your species?" Wynne asked. "Because you think differently?" Violet paused, considering. "Partly. But I think it's more than that. The galaxy is big, and it's full of species that are smarter than us, stronger than us, more advanced than us. But most of those species developed on worlds that were relatively stable. They built civilizations based on order and logic and careful planning. Humans? We built our civilization in spite of our world, not because of it. We learned to thrive in chaos because we didn't have a choice." "And the Council needs that perspective," Lixicor said. It wasn't a question. "The Council needs to remember that the universe doesn't care about careful planning," Violet said. "Things go wrong. Systems fail, people panic, and when that happens, you need someone who's comfortable with chaos, who can look at a disaster and see a problem to solve instead of a failure of procedure. Hux, who had been quiet throughout the meal, finally spoke. We were ashamed. For 3 days, we believed we had failed as warriors. As Wolkari, we brought disorder to the council. You brought reality to the council, Violet corrected gently. You did what real people do in real situations. You made mistakes under pressure. That's not failure. That's being alive. But we should have been better trained, Hux insisted. We should have known the procedures. You're kids, Violet said. You're supposed to make mistakes. That's how you learn. The real failure would have been if the adults around you had dismissed those mistakes instead of learning from them. She looked at Lixcor. No offense. The Wolkari elder's whiskers twitched. None taken. You are correct. We were so focused on the embarrassment of the situation that we nearly missed its significance. It took a human to show us that our cubs had uncovered something vital. Speaking of which, Violet said, what happens now? With the cubs, I mean. Do they continue training? They do, Lixcor said firmly, with a commendation in their records. They have demonstrated something valuable, the ability to reveal flaws through authentic experience. That is a skill the Wolkari military can use. Mox perked up. We are not being expelled? You are being celebrated, Lixcor said. Quietly, perhaps, because the full story involves admitting that the galaxy's safety equipment had a critical flaw. But within the Wolkari clans, you will be known as the Cubs who helped save lives through their mistakes. The Cubs exchanged glances, and Violet could see the weight lifting from their shoulders. They'd gone from shame to pride in the span of a day, and while they'd probably still be embarrassed about the incident for years to come, at least now they understood its value. Can I ask you something? Thule said, looking at Violet. When you first saw us, all tangled together, did you think we were stupid? Violet considered lying, then decided these kids deserved honesty. I thought you'd made a spectacular mess, but stupid? No. I thought you'd done something that seemed impossible, which meant either the universe had broken or there was something interesting going on. Turns out it was the second thing. You were not angry with us? Why would I be angry? You gave me a puzzle to solve, and I love puzzles. Plus, you helped me prove something I've been trying to explain to the Council since I got here. That human-style chaos isn't a bug. It's a feature. We find problems by making mistakes, and we fix problems by not being afraid to try things that might not work. Lixcor stood, and the cubs immediately fell silent. Human Violet, you have done more than free our cubs and identify a safety flaw. You have taught us something about the value of disorder, about the strength that comes from embracing mistakes rather than fearing them. The Wolkari are warriors, but we are also learners. We will remember this lesson. Violet stood as well, feeling the formality of the moment. Elder Lixcor, your cubs did the hard part. They made the mistake. They lived through the embarrassment, and they helped me understand what had happened. All I did was connect the dots. You saw dots where we saw only chaos, Lixcor said. That is a gift. That's humanity, Violet said. We're really good at finding patterns in chaos, probably because we've lived in chaos for so long that it feels like home. The cubs walked Violet back to her quarters after the meal, chattering excitedly about their training and asking endless questions about human history. Violet answered as best she could, telling them stories about early space missions, about disasters that became triumphs, about all the times humanity had looked at impossible odds and decided to try anyway. When she finally reached her door, Pix hung back as the others said their goodbyes. "Human Violet," he said quietly, "there is something I must tell you. We were not just racing to suit up. We were trying to prove something." "Prove what?" "That Volcari cubs are as capable as human children. We have heard stories about your young, how they survive situations that would kill adults of other species, how they adapt and improvise. We wanted to show that we could be like that too." Violet felt something catch in her chest. "Pix, you don't need to be like human children. You need to be like Volcari cubs. But if you want to know the secret of human survival, I'll tell you. We're not afraid to fail. We fail constantly. We just make sure we learn something every time we do." Pix's ears perked up. "Is it true that humans once sent children into space in a metal tube with less computing power than a modern toy?" Violet laughed. "Kid, we once tied a bunch of rockets to a tin can and hoped for the best. And it worked. That's the human way. Try things that probably shouldn't work. And when they do, figure out why so you can do it again." "I think," Pix said slowly, "that I understand now why the Council admitted your species. You are not the strongest or the smartest. But you are the ones who keep trying when everyone else has given up." "That's us," Violet agreed. "Too stubborn to quit, too curious to stop, and too optimistic to believe that impossible means impossible." She watched the cubs disappear down the corridor, their tails high and their steps light. They'd come through their ordeal not just intact, but stronger. They'd learned that mistakes weren't the end of the world, that chaos could reveal truth, and that sometimes the best thing you could do was mess up spectacularly and then help fix what you'd broken. Humanity didn't just survive chaos, they thrived in it. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was exactly what the universe needed.